The stars were dying. Ambassador Zethara stood before the great crystal window of the High Council chamber, watching another sun flicker and fade in the distance. The Vrakthul had found another system. Soon, that star would be nothing but cold space dust, just like the 17 others they had consumed this cycle. They move faster now, whispered Council Leader Memphios, his silver skin pale with fear. 3 systems in the last moon cycle. At this rate, they will reach our core worlds within the year. The emergency session had been going for hours. 12 species sat around the circular chamber, representatives of every world in the Keth-Moran Confederation. They were scholars, artists, healers, and philosophers. They had built a civilization based on knowledge, beauty, and peace. They had never needed weapons or armies. Now, they were all going to die. The Althorian Empire refused our request, reported Trade Minister Vel Andra, her 4 eyes dim with exhaustion. They say the Vrakthul are too dangerous to fight. What about the Centauri Federation? Asked someone from the back. They offered to take some of our cultural archives for preservation, Memphios said bitterly. But no military aid. They suggest we evacuate what we can and find new worlds to settle. Zethara turned from the window. Evacuate 12 billion souls? With what ships? And where would we go that the swarm cannot follow? The Vrakthul were not like other species. They were not flesh and blood, but living crystal entities that consumed entire planets for their mineral content. They moved through space in massive hive ships, stripping worlds bare before moving to the next system. No one knew where they came from. No one had ever successfully fought them. Perhaps we could negotiate, suggested Cultural Secretary Naxular. Offer them uninhabited worlds in exchange for... They do not negotiate. Zethara cut him off. They consume. It is all they know. The chamber fell silent. Outside the window, another distant star went dark. Memphios stood slowly, his ancient joints creaking. Then we send the signal. Galaxy-wide emergency broadcast. We offer everything we have. Everything? Whispered Velandra. Our medical technology that can extend life by centuries. Our energy crystals that power entire worlds. Our cultural archives spanning 4 million years. Our star charts mapping trade routes across the galaxy. Memphios's voice grew stronger. All of it, in exchange for military protection. The vote was unanimous. They had nothing left to lose. The signal went out that day, broadcast on every frequency, coded in mathematical languages that any advanced species could understand. It carried the coordinates of their worlds, detailed information about the Vrakthul threat, and an offer of unimaginable wealth to any civilization willing to help them fight. Days passed. Then weeks. The hegemony of worlds responded first. They expressed sympathy but explained that their military was engaged elsewhere. The Silicon Collective sent a polite message saying they did not involve themselves in organic conflicts. The ethereal ascendants did not respond at all. More stars went dark. The Vrakthul were getting closer. 36 responses so far, reported Communications Officer Lixandra during the daily briefing. All refusals. Some suggest we surrender to minimize suffering. Others recommend scattering our population across the galaxy. Zethara felt her hope dying with each report. The greatest civilizations in the galaxy were abandoning them. Species with fleets that could glass planets, with technology that seemed like magic, with armies that had conquered entire sectors, all of them too afraid to face the Vrakthul swarm. Wait, Lixandra said, her antennae twitching. There's something else. A new signal. Very weak. From. Let me check the coordinates. She paused, her expression confused. From the outer rim. A system called Sol. 3rd planet. The signal is crude, barely coherent, but it's definitely a response to our emergency broadcast. What does it say? Asked Memphios. Lixandra read the translation carefully. Message received. Help is coming. Hold the line. The chamber was silent for a moment. Then, someone laughed. A bitter sound. "Who are they?" asked Zethara. "What species?" "They call themselves humans. But I cannot find them in any galactic database. No trade records, no diplomatic history, no technological assessments. It is as if they do not exist. Probably some primitive species that intercepted our signal by accident," scoffed Trade Minister Velandra. What could an unknown species from the Outer Rim possibly do against the Vrakthul? But Memtheos was studying the signal data. The transmission was sent immediately after our broadcast. They did not ask for details about our offer. They did not negotiate terms. They simply said help was coming. "Foolish," muttered someone. "Or brave," said Zethara quietly. 3 days later, long-range sensors detected ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of their territory. Not the massive dreadnoughts of major powers, but smaller vessels. Dozens of them, moving in tight formation toward Kethmoran space. "Energy signatures are primitive," reported the sensor operator. "Metal hulls, chemical propulsion, basic energy shields, but they are definitely military vessels." As the ships grew closer, detailed scans revealed more surprises. The vessels were covered in weapon systems. Not elegant energy weapons like most civilizations used, but crude projectile cannons, missile pods, and devices the scanners could not identify. The ships looked like they had been built for one purpose: fighting. "Incoming transmission," announced Lixandra. The main screen flickered to life, showing a creature unlike anything in the galactic community. Bipedal, with pale skin and dark hair, wearing some kind of military uniform. Its eyes were small and forward-facing, like a predator. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth ship Indomitable," the creature said in clear, precise galactic standard. "We received your distress call. We are here to help." Zethara stared at the alien face on the screen. There was something in its expression, a hardness she had never seen in any civilized species. When this human said they were here to help, she believed it. But she also felt a chill of fear. What kind of species built ships that looked like weapons? What kind of beings called themselves by military ranks? What kind of help had they just invited into their peaceful worlds? The human ship was already requesting docking permission at their primary space station. Soon, they would meet face to face with these mysterious beings, from a system no one had ever heard of. Somehow, Zethara suspected that their galaxy was about to change forever. The human ship was smaller than expected, but it filled the docking bay with strange sounds. Metal clanking against metal, the hiss of atmospheric processors, voices speaking in sharp, quick tones. The Kethmorans who worked in the bay kept their distance, unsure what to make of these newcomers. Zethara waited in the diplomatic reception area with a full honor guard. She had chosen her finest robes, the ceremonial colors of peace and welcome. Behind her stood the council's best translators, cultural specialists, and protocol officers. They had prepared for hours, reviewing proper greeting customs for first contact situations. The airlock opened with a mechanical thump that made everyone jump. Captain Sarah Chen stepped through, and immediately Zethara knew this would not be like any diplomatic meeting she had ever attended. The human wore dark clothing covered in pockets and straps. Her boots made hard sounds on the metal floor. Most disturbing of all, she carried weapons. Openly. A projectile device on her hip and some kind of energy weapon strapped to her leg. "Ambassador Zethara, I assume?" Chen said, walking straight toward her, without any of the usual ceremonial approaches. "Yes, honored Captain. Welcome to Kethmoran Prime Station. We have prepared. Thank you, we need to talk immediately. How long until the Vrakthul reach your core worlds?" "Way." Zethara blinked. No greeting ceremony. No cultural exchange. No discussion of terms. The humans simply wanted to get to business. Perhaps we should first discuss proper protocols, suggested Cultural Secretary Nax Ular. Our species has many traditions for first contact situations. Secretary, Chen interrupted, looking at him with those predator eyes. How long until the Vrakthul arrive? The directness was shocking. In galactic diplomacy, conversations moved slowly, with careful attention to respect and hierarchy. But this human seemed to care only about immediate, practical concerns. 6 months, perhaps less, Zethara answered, deciding to follow the human's lead. Good. That gives us time to prepare. I need complete intelligence files on previous Vrakthul attacks. Ship configurations. Attack patterns. Casualty reports. Survivor testimonies. Everything you have. Of course. But first, we should discuss the terms of our agreement. Terms? Chen looked confused. You asked for help. We came to help. What terms? Well, our offer of technology, our energy crystals, our cultural archives. Chen waved her hand dismissively. Keep your stuff. We're not here to trade. We're here because someone needed help, and we could provide it. The Kethmoran delegation exchanged glances. This was completely outside normal galactic behavior. Species did not risk their military forces for free. There was always a price, always negotiations. Captain, Zethara said carefully, we appreciate your generosity, but surely you have some expectations. I expect you to help us understand the enemy so we can defeat them more efficiently. That's all. Chen turned to one of her officers, a large human male with scars on his face. Major Rodriguez. Set up the briefing room. I want tactical displays of every Vrakthul engagement in the database. As the humans began unpacking equipment, Zethara watched with growing amazement. They moved with purpose and efficiency, but also with an underlying tension. They constantly checked their weapons, scanned their surroundings, and communicated in quick, coded phrases. They acted like they expected attack at any moment. Your people seem very vigilant, she observed. We are, Chen replied, setting up what appeared to be a 3-dimensional battle map. In our experience, the universe is not a peaceful place. But surely your species has evolved past the need for constant warfare? Chen paused in her work and looked at Zethara with something that might have been pity. Ambassador, we've never had the luxury of evolving past warfare. On our world, everything wants to kill you. The weather, the animals, the plants, other humans. We learned to fight because we had to. The briefing began an hour later. Zethara presented everything they knew about the Vrakthul. Their crystal-based biology, their hive-mind coordination, their planet-consuming technology. The humans listened without interrupting. But they asked questions that no other species had ever thought of. Do they have individual identity, or are they truly a collective consciousness? Asked Major Rodriguez. How do they reproduce? Do they need specific minerals for offspring? Added Lieutenant Torres, a small human female with intense eyes. What happens to their coordination if their communication is disrupted? Chen wanted to know. The questions kept coming, each one stranger than the last. The Kethmorans had always focused on the tragedy of Vrakthul attacks, the loss of life and culture. The humans asked about supply lines, reproduction cycles, communication networks. They analyzed the swarm like it was a machine to be understood and broken. You think very differently from other species, Zethara commented during a break. How so? Most civilizations see the Vrakthul as a natural disaster, something to be endured or fled from. You discuss them like they are an enemy in war. Chen nodded. That's exactly what they are. An enemy. And every enemy has weaknesses. But they have destroyed 17 civilizations. Some of them had powerful militaries. Had they ever fought an enemy like this before? Well, no. Most species achieve space travel after establishing peace among themselves. That's their problem, Chen said bluntly. They forgot how to fight. They got comfortable. Soft. They expected their enemy to follow rules that don't exist. She pulled up a display showing human military history. Wars spanning centuries, weapons of incredible destructive power, tactics that seemed impossibly complex. We never stopped fighting, Ambassador. We fought each other. We fought our environment. We fought extinction events. It made us hard, but it also made us very good at survival. Your species sounds terrifying, whispered Protocol Officer Bexandel. Chen smiled, and for a moment her expression was almost gentle. We can be. When we need to be. But right now, you need us to be terrifying to something else. The next several days were intensive. Human engineers examined Keth Moran technology, not to steal it, but to understand how it could be weaponized. Their questions shocked the peaceful aliens. Can your medical nanobots be reprogrammed? What's the maximum energy output of your mining lasers? How quickly can your terraforming systems strip a planet's atmosphere? Everything was viewed through the lens of potential warfare. The humans saw weapons where the Keth Morans saw tools. They saw tactical advantages where the aliens saw peaceful technology. But most disturbing was their attitude toward sacrifice. During one planning session, Chen casually mentioned acceptable loss ratios for their fleet. Acceptable losses? Zethara was horrified. You plan for your people to die? We plan for the possibility, Chen corrected. In war, some losses are inevitable. The goal is to make sure those losses accomplish something meaningful. But they are your own people. Yes. And they understand the mission. They volunteered for this. Every human on these ships knew they might not return home. Zethara could not comprehend it. The idea of deliberately sending people into situations where they might die was against everything the Kethmoran culture stood for. How do you live with such thoughts? Chen was quiet for a long moment. Because if we don't fight, more people die. Sometimes, to save the innocent, someone has to be willing to pay the price. As the week passed, Zethara began to understand what her people had invited into their space. The humans were not just warriors. They were something the galaxy had never seen, a species that had turned warfare into an art form. They were going to save the Kethmoran Confederation. But she was beginning to wonder if her people would recognize their galaxy when the humans were finished with it. The Vrakthul arrived exactly when the calculations predicted. Their ships dropped out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Massive crystalline constructs that caught and reflected the light of Kethmoran Prime's sun. Each vessel was the size of a small moon, covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. There were hundreds of them, moving in silent coordination toward the inhabited worlds. On the bridge of the Kethmoran Defense Station, alarms shrieked. Officers scrambled to their positions, their faces pale with terror. This was the moment they had dreaded for months. Admiral Corthanis, the highest-ranking military officer in the Confederation, stood frozen as the sensor reports came in. By the ancestors, he whispered. There are so many. The human fleet hung in space between the swarm and the planet, like a collection of metal toys facing a crystal mountain. 47 ships against hundreds. The largest human vessel was smaller than the smallest Vrakthul scout. Incoming transmission from the swarm, reported Communications Officer Lixandra, her voice shaking. The main screen filled with an image that made several Kethmorans cry out in fear. The Vrakthul Queen Node appeared as a massive crystal formation with shifting patterns of light deep within. When it spoke, its voice resonated like breaking glass. Primitive organics. You inhabit worlds rich in necessary minerals. Submit to efficient harvesting, and your suffering will be brief. Resist, and the consumption will be prolonged and painful. It was the same message they had sent to every civilization before destroying them. Simple, direct, terrifying. Admiral Corthanus reached for the communication controls, ready to begin surrender negotiations. Before he could speak, another voice cut through the channel. "This is Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Fleet," the human said calmly. "We're here to inform you that these worlds are under our protection. Turn around and find somewhere else to play." The crystal being's patterns shifted, perhaps indicating surprise. "Unknown species. You possess 47 primitive vessels. We possess 423 harvest ships. Withdraw or be consumed." Chen's response came without hesitation. "We're humans. We don't withdraw. We adapt." The communication ended. For a moment, space was silent. Then Chen's voice came over the defense station's speakers. "Admiral Corthanus, pull your ships back to planetary defense positions. This is going to get messy." "Captain Chen," Corthanus replied, "perhaps we should attempt negotiation." "Admiral, with respect, your people hired us to fight. Let us do what we're good at." The first Vrak-Thul attack came in a wave of energy beams that could slice through a planet's crust. The beams lanced out toward the human fleet in precise, calculated patterns designed to destroy every ship simultaneously. The human ships scattered like startled fish. Nothing the Kethmorans had ever seen moved like that. The human vessels twisted and spun through space, using momentum and gravity in ways that seemed impossible. They dove toward planets and used atmospheric friction to change direction. They slingshot around moons and asteroids, making their movements completely unpredictable. "How are they doing that?" demanded Admiral Corthanus. "Their ships are not following standard navigation protocols," reported the sensor operator, his voice filled with amazement. "They are using gravity wells, solar wind, even the magnetic fields of the planets to assist their movement." The Vrak-Thul tried to adjust, firing again, but the humans had already changed position. Instead of running away, they were getting closer. "This is impossible," whispered Navigation Officer Plexander. "Those ships should not be able to maneuver like that. The gravitational forces alone should tear them apart." But somehow, the human vessels held together. More than that, they were using the chaotic movement as cover for their own attack. The first human strike hit a Vrak-Thul ship like a metal fist. Instead of energy weapons, they fired solid projectiles at incredible speed. Chunks of dense metal that punched through crystal hulls and exploded inside the ships. The elegant Vrak-Thul vessel shattered like glass struck by a hammer. The swarm's perfect formation wavered. "They destroyed a harvest ship," Admiral Corthanus said in disbelief, "in the first exchange." But the humans were not finished. As the Vrak-Thul tried to reorganize, human assault teams were already moving. Small ships, barely larger than fighters, attached themselves to crystal hulls like parasites. They cut through the outer layers with tools that seemed impossibly crude but devastatingly effective. "What are they doing now?" asked Zethara, who had joined the command crew to watch the battle. "It appears they are boarding the enemy vessels," reported the tactical officer. "Boarding? But the Vrak-Thul ships have no atmosphere, no life support systems. How can they survive inside?" "They brought their own atmosphere." Chen's voice cut in over the communication channel. "Portable life support. Our Marines are trained to fight in vacuum, hostile environments, anywhere we need to be." Through the tactical displays, they watched human soldiers moving through the interior of Vrak-Thul ships. They fought in zero gravity, in environments that would kill most species instantly. They moved like they belonged there. But most shocking was what they did to the ships they captured. Instead of destroying them, they planted devices that disrupted the crystal being's communication network. The perfect coordination that had made the Vrak-Thul so dangerous began to break down. "Impossible," Corthanus breathed. "They are turning the swarm's greatest strength against them." Individual Vrak-Thul ships began acting erratically. Without the hive mind's guidance, they made mistakes. They fired on their own vessels. They flew into asteroids. The perfect killing machine was tearing itself apart. The Queen Node's communication cut through the chaos. Unknown tactics, adaptation required, reassessing threat level. For the first time in recorded history, the Vrakthul swarm sounded uncertain. Chen's response was immediate. That's your first mistake. Thinking you can adapt faster than we can improvise. The human attack shifted again. This time, they used the Keth Moran's own mining equipment as weapons. Asteroid haulers became kinetic bombardment platforms, hurling chunks of rock at relativistic speeds. Terraforming lasers designed to carve out valleys cut through crystal hulls like knives through water. They are using our peaceful technology as instruments of war, Zethara observed with a mixture of horror and admiration. Everything can be a weapon if you think about it the right way, Chen replied. Your people built amazing tools. You just never imagined using them to fight. The tide of battle was turning. Vrakthul ships, that had seemed invincible, were breaking apart under the relentless human assault. But the swarm was learning, adapting their tactics to counter human unpredictability. Captain Chen, Admiral Corthanis called. They are beginning to coordinate again. They are learning to compensate for your tactics. Good, Chen said, and her voice carried something that might have been satisfaction. Now it gets interesting. The next phase of the attack was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human ships that had been scattered across the battlefield suddenly converged in a coordinated strike. They moved in perfect harmony, as if guided by a single mind. But this was not the rigid coordination of the Vrakthul. This was something more fluid, more creative. The humans fought like a pack of hunters, each individual contributing to a greater strategy while maintaining their own initiative. They hit the Queen Node's ship directly. The massive crystal construct tried to defend itself, but the humans had studied its design during the battle. They knew exactly where to strike to cause maximum damage. Explosions bloomed across its surface as human marines fought their way toward the core. What are they trying to accomplish? Asked Zethara. Chen's voice came through the speakers, but this time it was strained, as if she was fighting while talking. We are going to teach your crystal friends something new. Something they have never experienced before. What is that? Fear. Inside the Queen Node's ship, Captain Sarah Chen moved through passages that no organic being was supposed to survive. The corridors were made of living crystal that pulsed with alien thought patterns. The air was thin and poisonous, kept breathable only by her suit's life support systems. Behind her, a team of human marines advanced with weapons drawn. They moved in practiced formation, covering each other as they navigated the impossible geometry of the Vrakthul vessel. The walls around them hummed with the collective consciousness of the swarm, millions of voices speaking as one. Biosigns are getting stronger, reported Sergeant Mitchell through the comm. Whatever passes for their command center is close. Chen nodded, checking her weapon for the 100th time. This was not a mission to destroy the Queen Node. That would just scatter the swarm temporarily until a new leader emerged. This was something far more ambitious and dangerous. They were going to break the hive mind itself. Back on Keth Moran Prime Station, Ambassador Zethara watched the tactical displays with growing amazement and horror. The humans had somehow managed to board the most protected ship in the enemy fleet. They were fighting their way through defenses that had been considered impenetrable. How did they even get inside? Asked Admiral Corthanis. Dr. Marcus Webb, the human historian who had remained on the station, answered without looking up from his datapad. Captain Chen's team used a technique we call controlled destruction. They created a hull breach exactly where the ship's crystalline structure was weakest, then sealed it behind them. But the decompression should have killed them. Humans are very good at surviving in hostile environments, Webb said with what might have been pride. We evolved in one. Zethara studied the elderly human. Throughout the battle, he had remained calm, almost detached, as if watching his people risk their lives was routine. Dr. Webb, how can you be so calm when your friends might die? Webb looked up, and his expression was gentle but sad. "Ambassador, I have watched human beings fight for survival for over 60 years. I have seen them sacrifice themselves for strangers, throw themselves into impossible situations for the chance to save others. It never gets easier to watch, but you learn to have faith in their ability to find a way. But surely this is different. They are fighting something completely alien, completely unknown." "That's exactly when humans are at their best," Webb interrupted. "When facing the unknown, the impossible, the things that should not be fought. That is when we become most creative, most dangerous." On the tactical display, they could see the human team's progress through the Queen Node's ship. Red dots moving deeper into the crystal maze, getting closer to their target with each passing moment. "What exactly are they trying to do?" Zethara asked. Webb was quiet for a long moment. "Something that has never been attempted before. They are going to introduce chaos into a perfect system." Deep inside the Vrakthul ship, Chen's team reached a chamber that defied description. It was vast, filled with crystal formations that pulsed with light and thought. At the center stood the Queen Node itself, a massive crystalline being that seemed to contain the consciousness of the entire swarm. "Target acquired," Chen reported through her comm. "Beginning Phase 2. The Queen Node's voice filled the chamber, speaking in perfect galactic standard. "Organic intruders. You have achieved the impossible by reaching this location. Impressive, but ultimately meaningless. You cannot destroy what you do not understand." "You're right," Chen agreed, pulling a strange device from her pack. "We don't understand you. But that doesn't matter. We don't need to understand something to break it." The device in her hands was unlike any weapon the galaxy had ever seen. It was not designed to kill or destroy. It was designed to teach. "What are you doing?" the Queen Node demanded, its voice carrying the first hint of something that might have been concern. "Showing you something new," Chen replied, activating the device. "Something your perfect collective has never experienced." The device began broadcasting human memories directly into the Vrakthul communication network. Not words or images, but raw emotional experiences. Fear, panic, the terrible moment when someone realizes they are completely alone. The effect on the hive mind was immediate and catastrophic. For millions of years, every Vrakthul had been part of a collective consciousness. They had never been individuals, never been alone, never experienced the terror of isolation that every other sentient being knew. Now, for the first time, individual crystal beings felt what it was like to be cut off from the group. The Queen Node's scream shattered crystal walls throughout the ship. "What have you done? What is this sensation?" "That is fear," Chen said calmly. "Individual fear. The knowledge that you are alone, that you might die, that no one is coming to save you." Across the battlefield, the effects rippled through the swarm. Ships that had moved in perfect coordination suddenly stopped, their crews experiencing something they had no framework to understand. Panic spread through the hive mind like a virus, each individual crystal being suddenly aware of its own mortality. "The entire fleet is losing cohesion," reported Admiral Corthanis in amazement. "They are breaking formation, fleeing in all directions." But Chen was not finished. The second part of her plan was even more ambitious. She began broadcasting human tactical memories into the network. Battle strategies, creative solutions, the ability to think independently and adapt quickly. "You want to know why humans are dangerous?" she asked the terrified Queen Node. "It is not our weapons or our ships. It is our ability to think as individuals while still working together. You have collective power, but no individual creativity." The Queen Node tried to fight back, to restore order to the collapsing hive mind. "But how do you fight an enemy that attacks your very ability to think clearly? How do you restore unity to beings who are experiencing individuality for the first time?" "Stop this," the Queen Node pleaded. "Restore the collective, This isolation is unbearable. No, Chen said firmly. This is what every other species in the galaxy lives with every day. Welcome to being truly alive. She activated the final component of her device. This time, she broadcast human memories of cooperation. Images of soldiers working together not because they shared a single mind, but because they chose to trust each other. The concept of willing sacrifice, of protecting others not because you were forced to, but because it was right. The Queen Node's massive form began to change. The rigid crystal structure started to shift and flow, individual components moving independently for the first time in the species' history. Impossible, it whispered. I am. What is this feeling? That is choice, Chen explained. The ability to decide for yourself what you want to do, who you want to be. It is the most human thing there is. Throughout the swarm, Vrakthul ships were powering down their weapons. Not because they had been defeated in battle, but because individual crews were making the decision to stop fighting. They were experiencing something their species had never known: the ability to choose a different path. Captain Chen, came Admiral Corthanis's voice over the comm. The swarm is withdrawing. All ships are moving away from our worlds. What did you do? Chen looked at the Queen Node, which was now examining its own crystalline appendages with what could only be described as wonder. We gave them something more powerful than any weapon. We gave them the ability to think for themselves. This changes everything, the Queen Node said, its voice now carrying individual inflection instead of collective harmony. We are no longer a swarm. We are individuals. Yes, Chen agreed. And now you have to decide what you want to do with that individuality. The crystal being was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was thoughtful. We have consumed 17 civilizations. We thought it was necessary for survival. But now I understand that it was choice. Our choice. And we can choose differently. Chen smiled inside her helmet. That is the point. Everyone deserves the right to choose their own path. As the human team prepared to leave the Queen Node's ship, Zeth Ara's voice came through the comm. Captain, what you have done. I am not certain our galaxy will ever be the same. Good, Chen replied. Change is not always comfortable, but it is necessary for growth. The Vrakthul were trapped in their perfection. Now they are free to become something better. Behind them, the Queen Node watched them go with newly individual eyes, already beginning to imagine possibilities its collective consciousness had never been able to conceive. 3 months after the battle, the galaxy was still trying to understand what had happened. The Vrakthul swarm, terror of 17 civilizations, had simply stopped. Their ships had withdrawn to the edge of known space, where they were reportedly engaged in something unprecedented: debate. Individual crystal beings arguing with each other about philosophy, purpose, and the nature of existence. Ambassador Zeth Ara stood in her new office on Earth, looking out at the blue skies and strange yellow star of humanity's homeworld. She had requested permanent assignment here, wanting to understand the species that had changed everything. The reports keep coming in, she told Captain Chen, who sat across from her desk reviewing datapads. The hegemony of worlds wants to establish formal diplomatic relations. The Silicon Collective is asking for military advisors. 3 different species have requested human protection for their trade routes. Chen nodded absently, more focused on intelligence reports about potential threats in the Outer Rim. Good for them. Are they willing to learn what protection actually requires? That is what troubles me, Zeth Ara admitted. They want human protection, but they do not want to change their own ways of thinking. They want warriors to fight for them while they remain peaceful. That is not how it works, Chen said, looking up from her reports. You cannot outsource survival to someone else indefinitely. Eventually, everyone has to learn to fight their own battles. It was a lesson the galaxy was slowly learning. The human victory over the Vrakthul had not been won with superior technology or overwhelming force. It had been won with ideas, creativity, and the willingness to think differently about problems that seemed impossible to solve. Dr. Webb entered the office carrying a thick folder. The latest psychological evaluations of the former swarm entities, he announced, setting it on Chen's desk. Fascinating reading. How are they adapting to individuality? Zethara asked. Better than expected, Webb replied. Some are struggling with the concept of personal choice, but others are embracing it completely. The former Queen Node has become quite the philosopher. She is writing treatises on the nature of collective versus individual consciousness. Chen smiled. And the ones who are having trouble? They are learning, slowly. Some have requested to study human history, to understand how we balance individual freedom with collective cooperation. Others are experimenting with art, music, creative expression, things they never could do as part of the hive mind. Zethara found this information both wonderful and disturbing. But what about their victims? The 17 civilizations they consumed? Can that be forgiven? Forgiveness is a choice each species will have to make for themselves, Chen said diplomatically. But the Vrakthul are offering to help rebuild what they destroyed. Some of the crystal beings have incredible construction abilities now that they can think creatively instead of just consuming. A soft chime indicated an incoming communication. The wall screen activated to show Admiral Corthanis, now commander of the newly established Galactic Defense Initiative. Captain Chen, Ambassador, he greeted them formally. I am afraid we have a situation developing in the Andromeda contact zone. Chen straightened in her chair. What kind of situation? A species calling themselves the Void Hunters has emerged from dark space. They appear to be similar to the Vrakthul in their aggressiveness, but different in their methods. They do not consume planets. They sterilize them, remove all life and leave only empty worlds. How many ships? Unknown. They seem to appear without warning, destroy everything living on a planet, then vanish before anyone can respond. 3 colonies have been hit in the last month. Dueler. Chen was already reaching for her communication device. I will need to brief my fleet commanders. How soon can we deploy? Captain. Zethara interrupted. Perhaps this time, we should try diplomacy first? Not every problem requires military solution. Chen paused, considering this. You are right. We should try to understand what the Void Hunters want before we start shooting, but we prepare for war while we attempt peace. It was a very human approach. Hope for the best, plan for the worst. Over the following weeks, Zethara watched the humans prepare for their next challenge. They studied everything known about the Void Hunters, developed new tactics, improved their weapons and defenses. But they also sent diplomatic messages, attempted communication, tried to understand the motives of these new enemies. The response, when it came, was not encouraging. Organic life is disorder, the Void Hunter message stated. We bring purity. We bring silence. We bring the peace of emptiness. Well, Chen observed after hearing the message, at least they are honest about their intentions. But something had changed in how the galaxy responded to this new threat. Instead of scattering in fear, species began asking for human advice on defensive strategies. Instead of hiding, they started preparing to fight. The Kethmorans, once the most peaceful people in the galaxy, had established their own military training programs with human instructors. Admiral Corthanis reported that civilian populations across multiple star systems were learning basic combat skills. You have changed us all, Zethara told Chen one evening as they watched the sunset from the embassy balcony. Not just the Vrakthul. Everyone. The entire galaxy thinks differently now. How do you feel about that? Chen asked. Zethara considered the question carefully. Frightened. Hopeful. Confused. Your species has shown us that peace is not the absence of conflict, but the willingness to fight for what matters. That is a difficult lesson for people who spent millennia avoiding all confrontation. Growing up is never easy, Chen agreed. But it is necessary. A communication alert interrupted their conversation. The message was from the former Vrakthul Queen Node, now calling herself Crystal Song of Individual Thought. Human friends, her translated message began, we have been studying the Void Hunter threat. Our individual perspectives have revealed possible solutions that our collective mind never could have conceived. We request permission to assist in the coming battle. Chen read the message twice, then showed it to Zethara. What do you think? I think, Zethara said slowly, that you have created something remarkable. Former enemies becoming allies. Peaceful species learning to fight for survival. Individual consciousness spreading across beings who thought it was impossible. The galaxy is growing up, Chen observed. Finally learning that the universe is not always peaceful. And sometimes, you have to fight for the things you want to protect. Months later, when the combined fleet of humans, reformed Vrakthul, and newly militarized peaceful species met the Void Hunters in battle, the outcome was never really in doubt. The galaxy had learned from humanity's greatest lesson, that survival required not just the willingness to fight, but the creativity to fight in new ways, the courage to change when change was necessary, and the wisdom to know that sometimes the only way to preserve peace was to wage war. The Void Hunters, for all their power, had never encountered an opponent that could adapt and evolve in the middle of battle. They were prepared to face static defenses and predictable tactics. They were not prepared for reformed crystal beings using human guerrilla techniques, or peaceful species wielding weaponized mining equipment, or humans teaching other species to think like predators when necessary. The battle was won not by any single species, but by the galaxy finally learning to work together as individuals who chose cooperation instead of beings forced into it by circumstances. Standing on the bridge of the new flagship, Terran Guardian, Admiral Chen watched as the last Void Hunter ships retreated into dark space. Around her, beings from dozens of different species worked in harmony, each contributing their unique strengths to the common defense. Admiral, reported Commander Zethara, who had requested transfer to active military duty after her people's transformation. Long-range sensors show no remaining hostile contacts. The Void Hunters have withdrawn. Chen nodded, satisfied. Good. Begin recovery operations for damaged vessels, and send a message to all fleet commanders. Well done. As the mixed fleet began cleanup operations, Chen reflected on how much everything had changed. The galaxy was no longer a collection of isolated, peaceful species hiding from conflict. It had become a community of individuals and civilizations that understood both the value of peace and the necessity of defending it. The age of human guardianship had begun. But more importantly, the age of galactic self-reliance had begun as well. Humanity had taught the galaxy its greatest lesson. That sometimes, to protect the things you love most, you have to be willing to become the thing your enemies fear most. And the galaxy, finally, had learned to listen.